But more and more that is coming out, that thing about bridging the inequality gap. If you also listen to the World Economic Forum, that also, you know, seems to dominate discussion whenever it is that development issues are brought to the fore. And oftentimes that discussion, you know, that the World Economic Forum oftentimes is people by people from, part of people from the private sector. You're wondering, this message to the private sector at every point in time, is it having any effect whatsoever?
Well, the bridging gap between the rich and the poor, okay, is a necessary sentiment that is used to tone down, you know, the high-handedness of competition in even between countries and private sector organizations, because some private sector organizations can, you know, drown the other. Okay, the competition is harsh. However, the center point for Nigeria now cannot be, is giving opportunity for every human person to contribute the greatest he can to the economy of Nigeria. And that can only be done within the context of having a clearly national strategic vision that is driven by the president and institutions that are not necessarily public sector. It can be both public, the private sector, and other non-governmental organizations coming down together to keep driving this into our system so that we know that in this country, we can be a great country and our children and grandchildren can have a better society to live in than the one we are now enjoying. So that all the things, all the problems we have here are based on an underdeveloped society. We are a wonderful people. You know, you look at our entertainment system, look at the love we show to neighbors and things, you know, but all those things are reducing, our goodness is diminishing based, I mean, from the burden of surviving.
While you are making those points, I mean, if we have to get it right, those plans have got to be sustainable. But what we see is a new government comes in, they come with their own plans and program. What do we need to do to ensure that if we have this national project, everybody keys into it, and even if you introduce yours, there won't be that radical departure from what had been already?
You know that if you wind back a little bit, we mentioned in the last time I was here, when you have the national plan that is based on a national strategic vision which everybody accepts and has grown into, when a government, at the level of governance by political parties, all you discuss is the different strategies. So that thing is sacrosanct. Below it is an argument about strategies to achieve it. And that is where political parties come in. And each time you vote for one party, it means you believe that their strategy is better in achieving that. But right now that we have anything, we are not voting for them for anything. We either just vote for change or we vote for impunity to continue. So it doesn't matter because we don't have any vision in our mind as to what it should have been. Okay? But now that it is possible with a straight and direct talking, honest president to rebuild Nigeria, and we have that plan. After that, you know, there are certain things that once it happens, nobody can take you back from it again. Do you understand? It's so glaring, okay, because that is what people now defend. Remember, all the politicians tell you that politicians don't try to do the right thing. It is the people's pressure that make politicians to keep doing the right thing. So if the people's goal is united, okay, in those strong things that makes us Nigeria, anybody who even wants to get away from it, people will say, this is not Nigeria. There's something that the British Prime Minister will propose. The British people will say, this is not British. This is not English. This is not French. This is not German. This is not American. Indeed, the person will be forced to resign.
No, you spoke about, sorry, Chamberlain, but you did speak about, I want to take you back to when you talked about MDG offices.
Yeah.
That some of the things that, were set as goals were supposed to be things that we were able to achieve over time if our processes were right and had been in place. But because those goals were there in themselves and maybe people saw them as ending themselves, we had offices to that effect. But right now we're talking about, it's already 2015, MDG, we're supposed to have achieved, exactly, we're supposed to have achieved the MDGs by now. But now the United Nations has come up with Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. But some people will say that it was only right that perhaps we needed those offices to monitor our progress in certain areas, and if we do not think we're moving fast enough, to remind us that, look, these goals are here, we must meet them by 2015.
But what the MDGs did is that they now became operational offices. Government was voting money for them to do borehole, to do this. It's not their business. Do you understand? Should
they have like monitoring offices instead?
Now every government has systems for monitoring and evaluation. Okay, so it is to strengthen those and have it right from community level to ward level, from ward level to local government level, to state level to federal level, and limit the federal to what federal should be doing, the state to what state should be doing, and therefore reduce the burden of governance at each of these levels and have performance at the point of service. The most critical thing for public sector in this country is lack of performance at point of service.
That's the issue, and oftentimes point of service is always localized. It's always within your community.
Yeah, that is why you need. And why do they not perform? Because there is no money, there is not adequate staffing. The best people are in the offices in the state, in air-conditioned offices, doing barely nothing. Also, the same at federal level. The place where the work should be done, in the hospitals, in the schools, in the police stations, the lowest people are there without adequate training and without adequate support.
But monies are budgeted for such.
But the money is. I don't know what happens to it before it gets to those people.
All right, okay. Key this in before so that you can take it off from there.
Yeah.
Someone once visited a hospital and she found out that there were no beddings, everywhere was, very unkempt until an announcement was made that a certain officer was visiting. Less than 24 hours, the beddings were all laid out, and all materials in the pharmacy were there. So these are the service providers now in such communities.
Yeah.
And one would have thought that over the years or over time, they were starved of such materials or funding. But how come that sometimes just a mere announcement that someone who's in charge or who oversees such facility was coming, then you see that everything is there.
That is why I said right from the beginning, you cannot leave it just to the people who manage the facility to govern the performance. The local community. That is why you have a committee. And this is critical for our development, because this local committee, let's say in the area where we live, let's say we live just around this area, whatever you call it, we now identify good people who are 5 members of a 7-man committee that is governing the hospital or the school or the security system. Now, this is from where the politicians who will go to represent the ward will emerge. But right now, there's no training ground for politicians. Suddenly, somebody becomes a governor after being nothing in terms of serving other people. So it is from this that we are marched to ward level of service, to local government level of service, to state level of service, and to national service. They would have been tested. It's like just choosing somebody on the street to go and play in the first 11 for Green Eagles, without playing in the primary school, playing on the age group, and playing in whatever other system. So we need to have a well-structured community-level governance.
Yeah, but
primary governance in health, education, security, and administration.
Some people will say that should be taken for granted. Unfortunately,
it doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist.
You take for granted many things.
What single significant change do you think that we need to make in terms of structure? Because when you were speaking the last time about community level, what they call that now, the primary health care, for instance, which you say should just be 2 rooms with the community provider there. And I said local government, because usually that's where it's the local government that's supposed to provide primary health care, as it were. But the state governments, it will seem, are the ones taking over that particular task. What do you think needs to change? One singular thing that needs to change in terms of structure, so much so that maybe our constitution, we might not need to tweak it.
But the single thing that needs to change is one, autonomy of the local government. Because at the moment, the governors are chopping the money of the local government in one way or the other. I'm not saying it illegally, but they are in charge of the local governments because the local governments don't have autonomy. If the local governments have autonomy, they can be held responsible for what happens in their under their watch.
So you don't think that autonomy helps?
Autonomy is everything. Because look at, as soon as they gave universities autonomy, they started getting their money, they started spending their money, they started holding them responsible. Some kind of improvement occurred. I'm not saying that universities are fantastic, but you need, who is managing the system needs to be held responsible, but he has to be given the authority to manage the system. Not somebody very far away from there is not supposed to manage, not supposed to see that money.
All right.
Yeah.
We have to anchor there.
I'm sorry.
Very interesting discussion. Thank you very much indeed for coming on.
Thank you.
Dr. Ndi Onuekwusi is a development consultant. We'll be back after the break. Don't go away.